Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zach GP channel, and in today's episode I have another post-sprint quali final thoughts video for F1 Fantasy. So make sure if you like what you see, like and subscribe. You can also find me over at FanAmp, which we will be doing a deadline live stream an hour before the sprint race. So like I always mention in these post-sprint race or FP2 videos, I like to keep things short and snappy to give you peeps the best teams and assets just to choose off the bat of all the sessions we've had before the deadline. So let's get straight into it, and we've got to talk about the budget drivers straight off the bat because these ones are so crucial for your team coming into China, and that is because of this one thing. Any driver with a DNF already on their name will most likely drop minus 0.6 again in China, no matter what they score. Now, I will quickly do a little brief overview of how the price changes work. However, you don't really need to know how it works. If you just follow this graph for the Chinese Grand Prix weekend, you can see exactly what each driver needs to hit that threshold. So if you do want the calculation, it is the average points scored across 3 races divided by the asset's cost. That is why you see Oscar Piastri get a minus 0.3 in Australia, as he got 10 plus 0 plus 0, averaged is 3.33, divided by 23 is 0.14, which is below that terrible 0.2 threshold. And this is how it works for every driver, and that is why it's so crucial to get your B tier assets right this weekend. Because like I mentioned, the DNF drivers already basically will get a minus 0.6. Look at the graph, what they need. No way is Hadjar or Bortoletto, the likes of them, getting 20 plus points. But also it means that there's some drivers like Hulkenberg, Albon, Stroll, who are almost guaranteed a price increase. Just look at their points on the graph. They literally need to crash out to not even get a 0.6 million increase. So it's so crucial in your team to make sure you have the right B tier assets. So I'll literally just put a nice list of all the drivers you should be considering, and any driver that isn't in it for the B tier assets, you don't want to go near this weekend. Hulkenberg, Stroll, Antonelli, Albon, Ocon are all the best assets B tier wise, so below 20 million. And then on the fence drivers, where you could bring them in just to see exactly what they do because they don't have a DNF to their name, would be Gasly, Behrman and Tsunoda. All of those are the drivers you want to be fitting in your team. Now, you most likely will have to bring in a driver like a Hadjar or a Doohan or a Bortoletto. However, you just want to keep that to a minimum of maximum 2 in your team. Realistically though, I would only be happy once I'd only have 1 of them in my team. And it is a shame that that's how the price system works in F1 Fantasy this season, because we don't even need to see the points for China to know that these aren't the drivers you need to use. Like in the sprint qualifying, it does not even matter where Bortoletto, Hadjar qualify or if they do really well in the race, because they're still going to get that minus 0.6 million, and then your team is going to be much worse off later down the line. Now for the A tier assets, it's a similar situation. Obviously the swings aren't as big, but again, we know exactly who to not go near and to go near. So who do you go near? Well, you just follow the graph again, and the big 2 of the A tier side are Norris and Russell. Now I'm going to put Piastri in this side because also with how McLaren look, he will definitely get over 20 points. And this is where it gets quite interesting, because in China Sprint Quali, Ferrari actually did the best. However, I know it looks like that just from the timings. However, McLaren still definitely looked like the fastest. Piastri and Norris just really didn't get their laps right in SQ3. So my money is still on the McLarens being the best, because now they have chances to get overtake points and position gain points to increase their tally. So yes, Ferrari looked good. I think McLarens are still the ones to go for right now. He's going to be fine. George Russell, again, are definitely going to get that 0.3 million increase if they don't crash out. And bear in mind, in China, we don't see too many crashes, so don't expect there to be a crash fest like in Australia. And literally the only driver who will most likely increase but isn't worth it is Max Verstappen, because he still doesn't get you enough points compared to the McLaren boys for his pricing. You can see in Australia Verstappen's points compared to Norris, it's just a whole different level at the minute. But now with Ferraris doing well in sprint qualifying, I wouldn't completely write them off. Now I will show some teams soon with the Ferrari drivers, but for me, it's still not worth it. However, if you do believe in the Ferrari hype after sprint qualifying, I will definitely show you some teams to build around. Now, let's head over to the Constructors, because this is where it starts a little bit interesting, because Ferrari actually did very well, coming 1st and 4th. Now, like I mentioned before with the drivers, it's a risky situation, however, because if you still want to just go off who's definitely going to go off a budget increase, it'd still be McLaren and Mercedes. And also, you can build teams around McLaren and Mercedes, McLaren and Williams, adding Ferrari into the mix is quite hard. So for me, knowing that McLaren still looked good on the race pace, and they did look good until they cocked up SQ3, I'm still very much looking at McLaren as the top constructor. So realistically, 80 aside on the constructors, you only really want to be looking at McLaren and or Mercedes. And then BT aside, you want Williams for that price increases and to just pair nicely with McLaren. And if you just need more extra boost to your prices and you don't really care about points this weekend, then you can also look at Haas. However, I don't know about that. I don't think that's one I would be looking at. But anyway, now let's move on to how these sprint qualifying results have affected my team selections and what you should look at. And it's quite funny to say, but as you can tell from this whole video, I haven't really had to use a lot of sprint quali to say my final thoughts, and that is because realistically it all comes down to which of the McLarens did better. Do you want to go for the Piastri McLaren Mercedes build, or do you want to go for the Norris McLaren Williams build? Now this is where it gets interesting, because you might think I would be looking less at the Norris McLaren Williams builds now because of Norris qualifying in 6th place for the sprint quali. However, because we don't get points for the sprint quali, and you really don't get that many points for coming first in a sprint race, you get drivers scoring more points if they get more position gains and overtake points. So all of a sudden, Lando Norris looks out of position and actually looks better for F1 Fantasy. So I'm very much 99.9% sure on going on the Norris builds. And I'll show you what I'm sort of looking at for Lando Norris. So as you can see, it consists of Norris as your 2x driver. Hadjar, he's the dud driver in this team, as he will take a minus 0.6, but everyone else is due price increases on this team. They don't look terrible, and you still get McLaren as that constructor, who still look like the best asset even after Ferrari's qualifying with Williams, with Albon helping them quite a bit. Now, if you do believe in the Ferrari pace and think the likes of Hamilton could score a lot of F1 Fantasy points, this is the issue when building a team with Ferrari, because I don't feel comfortable just having them as a single constructor, as would they score enough points to carry Williams? I don't think so. I still think McLaren would outscore them. So that would mean you'd have to pair them up with Ferrari and Mercedes, and then all of a sudden, yes, you could get a lot of good points with the likes of Hamilton, Ferrari, Mercedes, but then look at the rest of your team. You're gonna lose a lot of budget. So if you go for a Ferrari build, that is the only issue I can see at the minute. And then finally over to the other team that you could use for me, which would be the Piastri builds, where you have Piastri, McLaren, Williams. Because again, if you did Piastri, McLaren and Mercedes, yes, you would get a lot of good points, but your budget would take a hit. So for me, I would really only look at Piastri, McLaren, Williams, which then would allow you to bring in Alex Albon, who has looked phenomenal this weekend so far, qualifying for sprint quali in 9th. So yes, that would be good. It really all depends on who do you think is going to win the race, Piastri or Norris, or who's going to get the most points in F1 Fantasy. For me, I still think it's going to be Lando Norris, but if you think it's Oscar Piastri, this is what I'd go for. So now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the chips. Now, Wildcard is going to be used quite a lot by quite a lot of people. I, myself, will be using Wildcard. I have 4 transfers to make, and I'm not willing to make that minus 20. If, and this is a big if, bear in mind everyone, if you have only a minus 10 to get to a team where you're comfortable with the price changes and with how many points it could get you, take the minus 10 instead. It's only once it becomes a minus 20, then it really starts hindering the performance of the team. So, Wildcard 100% is an option, and it's an option I'm most likely going to be using. Now, for anyone who had a good Australia and their budgeting looks brilliant, they've got over 100 million in team value, it now means you could use Limitless. And this is a brilliant track to use Limitless on. We get plenty of overtakes here. I'll show how many we had in 2024. So you could get a lot of points on the cards. Now, for me, what would the Limitless team look like? And it would look like Norris 2 times. Like I said, he looks out of position for the sprint quali, so there's more points on offer for him. Verstappen, he looks stable in 2nd place. Leclerc in 4th, brilliant. Piastri 3rd, looks good. And of course, Hamilton on the pole. Very much looking like a double McLaren-Ferrari build at the minute, with McLaren and Ferrari as constructors. That is as good as your Limitless is going to get in China, and 100% the one I would do if I was using Limitless this weekend. But that about wraps up my final thoughts post-sprint quali for F1 Fantasy. It really is annoying how it has come down to this, but I can't stress this enough. Just get the price gainers in your team. It really is going to help you a lot down the line. But anyway, if you liked what you saw, like and subscribe. I'll put down my F1 Predicts League, which is quite fun at the minute. I'm quite enjoying doing it. Then you also have my big league. You can check that out on the featured league if you see the fantasy formula, which you can also watch me on FanApp for previews and the deadline show. But that about wraps everything up. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you all have a great weekend and your F1 fantasy scores are brilliant. And let's hope for some great F1 racing. Take care.